Hey, Jeff.
Hey.
Morning.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
All right, I think we can get started, and whoever joins. Cool. Previous week to have a demo with load testing. Today, that was one goal. Scarbeck stretch auto deploy workable. That is not completed, right? Like we talked about that the other. Yeah.
Yeah, we got a little bit of work to do.
Yeah, sounds good. Finish up the data with you. I have no clue what this was about. I should take better notes.
That's fine.
Right.
I can explain it. It was reconciling the database.yaml config in the pod versus the database.yaml config on the sidekiq exporter VM. The biggest gap right now are the replicas for application load balancing. This is something that I don't think we anticipated, which is that we use console, which does a DNS lookup to get the list of replicas for application load balancing. And we don't have a good story. We don't have a good story yet for how to do this, in our sidekiq pod. Maybe we can run console. Maybe we have a couple options. I tried to lay them out in the issue. Do we run a sidecar? Do we just run console agent in another pod and then make console available for the sidekiq pod? I don't know. I think we have different options that we're going to need to figure out, and whether this goes into the official chart or not, I don't know either.
That's a good question, actually. What do we expect users to do?
I think in general, because Patroni is the one registering itself as a console service that has all the replicas in the list. It's kind of custom to GitLab.com. I mean, other people could do this, but they don't necessarily do it. We do ship with console, so I don't know, but I think this pattern of using this DNS, console DNS for load balancing is probably unique to us, or very few people are doing it.
Okay. I wouldn't even say this is a P2 then, Jarv. This seems like a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, of course we can run without using the load balancer, but we can't go to prod until we have it.
No, this is a production blocker.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm more inclined to say we want to understand the impact of this one queue in Kubernetes. So my vote would go even for something that is not permanent. Like we don't have to make a decision immediately and solve 5 problems.
Yeah.
If we go down the route of thinking about all the use cases that the users could have, that's going to drag us out in a completely different direction. So we could leave the inclusion in the charts and all of that for one of the next iterative steps.
Yeah.
And just find the simplest possible way. If that means running a sidecar, then running a sidecar is fine.
That could be. I mean, if we really wanted to, we could also just go without load balancing for this queue, because this queue is probably just not making a whole lot of database calls. At least what I'm discovering during my load testing and seeing what we do in production, I mean, we're not doing exports at a high rate at all. It's very low. So except when someone abuses us, but yeah, I think we'll just work it out. We'll work it out in the issue.
Yeah, let's work it out in the issue. Cool. For this one, I don't like. If we decide to not go down the route of immediately thinking about how are we going to place this in the charts, for this one, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Let's just find a way to get it working.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think the other ones are completed. Readiness review. Scarbeck, readiness review is completed from our side, but we need to include others, right? Did that start up?
Yeah, it started up. We've had a bunch of people comment on it so far. I've got one person left to review it, and then I consider it mergeable.
Sounds good. Cool. All right. Jar, do you want to demo the load testing?
Sure, yeah, I can do that first. Let's see. I was prepared for this. I just have to get my screen layout. So I have both browser and here we go. Okay.
The less perfect this is, the more faith I have that we are doing a good thing.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my whole desktop here. And what I have is the workload resources on the right. What we can see here is just the CPU and memory usage of the sidekiq exporter pod. It looks like we're running 2 pods right now. Normally I actually see 1. We can take a look.
The order of that column changed, so you're only running 1 pod.
Yes, okay, I see it seems the sort order. Okay. Yeah, so we have 1 sidekiq export pod. That's expected. You can see the CPU usage is really low. And everything is fairly low. So the first thing, one of the things we wanted to look at was, what is our current, what are we currently seeing in production for export in general? I just looked over a 24-hour period. We peak at 10 exports a second, but that's fairly unusual. The more typical rate is 5 exports every minute. So it's really slow. We don't see a lot of these. Of course, when we do get abused, it goes up quite a bit. I didn't realize that we already have rate limiting in that for export specifically in the application, and this is not through rack attack or anything. It's actually just a rate limit for, I think, like 1 export every 5 minutes per project. And I ran into this during load testing because the first thing I wanted to try to do was just export, like 100 times for 1 project, and that didn't work. So I had to hack the code to make that work. But I think the first thing we're going to try here is just doing an export across 10 different projects. The project example that I'm using is Ansible because I just looked for a medium-sized project, and this one's around 400 megabytes. It's like, I think, a good example of like maybe kind of on the larger side. I think using like these very small projects is not a good reference. So, and I, unfortunately with pre-prod, which is where I'm doing my testing, using a very large project like GitLab HQ or the Linux kernel, I was having trouble, and I think it has to do with the fact that pre-prod uses NFS. It was just taking very long. So I think when we go to staging, we're going to be able to do some better load testing with very large projects. Ansible itself takes about 20 seconds or so to export. So I think it's a good example. So here in the lower right, I have just watching the pods. You see that there's 1 export pod here running. I'm tailing the logs, and I'm just pulling out some interesting things from sidekiq. This is also going into Stackdriver, but it's a bit nicer to see it in the terminal. So I have a for loop. So what I'm doing here is I have 10 different projects. They're all just imports of Ansible, and we're just going to hit the API, and we're going to export all of them right after each other. So you can see like successful responses for all of them. You can see that we have the first start down here in the lower left. Just to explain, this is the queue latency. This is the time that it goes into Redis to the time that sidekiq picks it up. You can see it's very fast. And then it completed in about 15 seconds. Now you see that the next one started. Now the queue latency is a bit higher because it was waiting in the Redis queue for longer. We look over here and we can see that, okay, we still have one pod. So, nothing has tried to scale up yet. If we go over to the compute resources, hopefully what we'll start to see here is that our CPU will start spiking. Let me make this spike. So you can see the CPU is going up, and we'll probably, HBA is probably starting to think about scaling. You can see it right now that sidekiq export now is starting to bring up another one. This is one thing, I think we're kind of aware of this, but at the same time, maybe not realizing how sucky it is how long it takes for these pods to boot. It's 1 minute and 40 seconds, which is terrible. The dependency init container alone takes 40 seconds. So if we just make that a really simple check to make sure that the database schema is correct, then that shaves off 40 seconds. So now we're down to 1 minute. Still seems too long to me, but at least it's a little bit better. So now we have some more of the export. I guess no, we just have 2 of them, but it'll probably start to spin up a third one. And you see the second one is still, still trying to get ready. So if you notice here on the lower left, you can see that the start, nothing is being done in parallel right now. We're just doing one at a time. So these latencies are creeping up because these are the amount of times that the job is in the Redis queue. The latency, of course, the time it takes is the same. It doesn't really change, but still you have to wait a long time just for the job to be picked up.
So this would mean that a big export has the potential of blocking up quite a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I saw this when I tried to export GitLab HQ, from GitHub. I imported that project and then I tried to do an export of it. And yeah, it just never, it was just blocking everything. So in that case, with only one pod, the CPU doesn't climb. So we're kind of stuck at one pod and we're blocking everything else. So that's no good. We probably would want to scale up in that case. And that's where I think we're lacking a bit. We have in production now, we have 4 sidekiq export VMs and 4 sidekiq processes running in each, so that we can do 16 simultaneous exports, all the time. It's statically allocated, right? So, yeah.
But what if? We're starting here fairly low. We're starting here with 1 pod, which is not even close to comparable to what we have in prod. So we don't have to start with something low here. We can start with something relatively high. Let's say 10 pods. That means 10 imports that can be handled at the same time, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, this slow ramp up is not that big of a deal unless there is abuse. If there is abuse, then we are gonna see a lot of queuing.
Yeah.
Just to kind of paint a bit of picture around the usage pattern that we see in project export, right? So I would say 90%, I don't know the exact numbers, but in my head, it's 90% of all project exports happen between 4 o'clock in the morning and 10 minutes past 4 in the morning, or UTC morning, right? And
I don't know if that's what I saw, but I can. Okay.
Definitely, I can just take a look at the sidekiq. And if you look at the sidekiq every morning, there's a long queue of traffic.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now because I just did this query.
Oh no, I look in Prometheus at the sidekiq queue, but yeah, you can look in here as well.
So here is job status done, queue project export, and account. So I don't know. It seems like we have these little.
Oh, that's weird because I normally see if I go to, let me just go to my dashboard, which is the priority detail one, and look at exports. Sorry, I just want to.
Is this is this on the SLA dashboard for sidekiq?
Yeah, I'll give you the link that I use. So
you're looking at just the queues. queue
So
length?
there's a total execution time for priority, sidekiq estimated P95 queue time. Okay, so maybe it's not 90%, but like every morning we get a really long queue, a backlog of export jobs at 4 o'clock, right? And the reason for that is that those jobs are themselves GitLab CI, they're kicked off by GitLab CI jobs that are at daily, that are all run at 4 a.m. because that's when at daily jobs are run.
Yeah.
And so, but my experience is that like people like don't see, you know, there's no sort of, no one minds if it takes an hour for those jobs to get scheduled.
Sure. Yeah.
If you look at total, sorry, I'm just trying to look here. I mean, so at 4 o'clock every morning, it'll take up to 10 minutes. Well, that's the highest Prometheus bucket that we have.
Yeah.
It's up to 10 minutes on that bucket that it's queuing, and no one seems to mind. And that's definitely the worst.
Okay. Well, I think like the biggest challenge we have right now is to figure out how we're going to scale, or how many pods do we need to have, you know, at minimum to be able to service these exports. I was a bit surprised that I did this very large export. It hung around for a pretty long time. Do you know, shouldn't there be a timeout for how long these jobs run before they, or is there no timeout?
Right now,
I
there
don't
isn't.
think there's, sorry, Bob, you go ahead.
I don't think there is.
No.
That sucks. Like there really needs to be, right?
How long are you talking here? You're talking hours?
This was at least 30 minutes, if not an hour. And the reason why is because it's pre-prod and we have NFS, and I think it was just like something was taking a very long time. I didn't dig into it. But to me, that sounds like we need to time out, right?
So,
we can't wait that long.
It's one of those things where, yeah, it's kind of sunken cost, right? And people probably start trying it over and over and over.
Yeah.
But I think more importantly, and to the point, which is like a totally different conversation, like obviously project exports are a real mess at the moment. Today I found out about group exports, which is even more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't pick an easy queue like
yeah, I think
for
that was the
that.
point. But like we don't have that many runners, Jav. I think each project export node has got like two effective threads that can run at once, or maybe 4. Is it 2? And there's 2 machines.
Yeah, there's four machines.
Oh, there's 4 machines. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we just match whatever we've got in production, like that's fine. And I think the number one thing is we just have to be like set expectations that there will be queuing, but there is queuing, right? So there always has been queuing, and sometimes jobs will take like 15 minutes to schedule, and that's okay.
So I think we have 4 processes. I can check right now. I think we have 4 processes and 4 VMs. So that'd be 16. Let's just take a look.
That's accurate.
Yeah. So I think it's 16, Andrew. That's a lot of pods. I mean, that's a lot of pods. But
the problem with the slow boot time that you see now that's causing the queuing and so on, won't that be a problem for web pods in the future as well, if it's actually the Rails environment that's taking a long time to boot?
Yeah, I mean,
it'll be a problem for any pod that runs Rails. This is a dependency container that's inside of every single pod that, or inside of every deployment that we use in GitLab, our GitLab chart.
So should we be working on making that faster? Because now that's not something we've ever paid attention to, I think.
I've created an issue inside of the charts repo to discuss what we could do with that.
Is there much that you can do though?
I think realistically, whatever that dependency pod is doing needs to be separated out into its own thing, whatever that thing is, and run prior to an upgrade, perhaps.
It's the problem is it's loading Rails, and you know it just takes a very long time. If we do something else for the database check, I think it's going to be on the order of seconds instead of like less than 10 seconds, I assume.
There were some suggestions in that issue Scarbeck referenced,
Yeah.
right? Like that we don't have to load Rails only to do this check. I forgot what it was now, but there was a suggestion that
No,
would
but we're going
basically
to have to
directly
load.
connect.
We're going to have to load it at some point, somewhere. It's going to be a problem. So I really think it's a good idea to look into that.
Look into
Yeah.
Rails not being in Kubernetes?
No, making it not as slow to boot.
Yeah.
Can we use Spring?
Okay, now we are getting
Yeah.
into a territory of jokes, like real
Into
jokes.
the weeds now.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
and one last thing is that I tried to play with concurrency and read up a little bit about how Sidekiq handles concurrency and that supposedly you can have jobs on multiple threads. Doesn't matter for export. Like if I set a high concurrency, we only do one export at a time. Does that make sense to everyone or not? Or would you expect to have more than one export happening simultaneously if I set up concurrency for Sidekiq?
Is that part of the difference between Sidekiq and Sidekiq cluster?
No. Sidekiq itself has this concurrency option. You can set it like they say they recommend like, I don't know, between 10 and 50 or something like that.
So,
And it spawns multiple threads and allows you to, process jobs more efficiently. But for this, it doesn't matter. So I don't.
Jav, you definitely want to keep it really low for export because of the memory constraints of the.
Sure. Yeah, I just was expecting different results. I don't know. I'll play with it a bit more, but I was expecting at least to see jobs processing simultaneously, but that was not the case.
So, like the whole reason we separated Sidekiq out into its own cluster was so that the processes they have a very low concurrency on there because of the memory constraints of the really poorly written export process at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So you want to keep it as low as you can go.
Well,
and
okay.
the other thing is that the threads, right? Like, I think a lot of it is basically spinning over database results and then emitting JSON, and so it's very CPU intensive. And so with a global interpreter lock, you can't really sort of actually multitask in those Sidekiq processes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. I think that's about it for the demo. I don't know what to take away from this. I think we need to test the large project export a bit more. I think I'm going to wait until we do that on staging. I'd also like to do some more like apples to apples comparison between VM and Kubernetes. We can like enable Kubernetes for a bit, test some project exports, and see what how the latency compares to the VMs, just to make sure that there's nothing different about that. I don't expect there to be, but it'd be a good test to do.
Maybe consider setting the minimum scale to equal that of staging, which I think would be 4 workers. So we would have 4 pods in staging by default.
Yeah.
The other concern that I have primarily right now is disk usage, because some of our larger projects are going to use a significant amount of disk. And I think last week we saw a lot of alerting come through that our Sidekiq exporters we're starting to run out of disk space. So I'd want to make sure that we run the cluster out of space.
What kind of disk are you using?
We're not using memory. We're using, SSD.
Okay.
And it goes away once the pod is terminated.
Yeah, it's like ethereal. It's like.
It's ephemeral. Yeah. But these pods, they live for a pretty long time. So I'm not sure how we're going to deal with this.
If we rack up jobs that end up dying and stuff doesn't get cleaned up, we'll eventually run that pod out of space, and Kubernetes will terminate the pod if it exceeds the 50 gigabyte limit.
Yeah.
Can we just have like a lifetime?
50 gigabyte limit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we cannot export My Little Ponies anymore.
Yeah.
Is
I
there
think
a
that's
way to have
reasonable.
is there a way to have like a maximum time on a pod anyway? Like just say after 3 hours recycle it when it's finished its job? No.
As far as I
I'm not
know,
aware of
no, but
this.
yeah.
Could stop it
Something to
from
look into,
responding to
maybe.
readiness. I guess it could stop sort of responding to health checks or something. But yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Let's move on to the next thing, if we have anything left.
So I do have a couple of remarks, Jarv.
Sure.
There are quite a lot of challenges around this. What I'm considering, like, there are a lot of challenges around running this in production the way it is right now. Can we like have one place where we have those challenges written down? So we said long boot up time of new pods. We mentioned 50 gig disk. We mentioned concurrency and a couple of other things, so that we can evaluate what kind of risk we are willing to take. Because if we go down the route of resolving every single problem that we've just seen, knowing that this already exists in production, but by pure luck of us not caring about limits, it works, I don't think we'll ever finish this.
Yeah, so I'm using the Epic for that. I have two. I have one for chart, since we can't do this cross-group Epic linking or cross-group issue linking, I think. So I'm just using this. And Scarback, I think you're aware of this as well. So we should just add them here if they're not in. Otherwise, we just associate them to the Epic. But I'm using this as the source of truth, the Epic.
All right, I'll ping you all there then.
Yeah.
So add those things, and then I think I would like to reorder. Like, that is great, but I would like to have a order of things that we want to execute and what is the cut line. If that means we create a new board in the GitLab org repo, we'll do that. I'll do that.
We could do that, I guess.
And I just want to make sure that we don't over-engineer this. Well, over-engineer. I wish the whole export was properly engineered, but it was not, and that's fine, and we know why. But I want to just make sure that we don't overspend on this.
Sure. Yeah. Especially since we can have VMs and Kubernetes running simultaneously for a while. We can easily switch back and forth. So
exactly.
We don't want to be held up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Awesome demo, Jarv. Thanks for doing that. I think it exposed really, really great things here. So my next question for you would be, is there a way we can can you add this script somewhere in CI and fire this off at will, even if it means just like running this in a pipeline?
Yeah,
Bob,
we can.
Were you saying something? I think Bob was saying something. I didn't hear him. Oh. Okay.
Sorry, I was unmuted. Didn't mean to.
No worries. I thought you were saying something. Yeah, let's maybe do that and then have this as a standard part of our demo. So whenever we do something, in the demo we can just fire this off in the pipeline, and then continue our demo normally, just to see like a bit of traffic on this.
Sure. Okay. Did you want to talk about the dog fooding thing? It's in the list.
Yes, I did. So what I'm trying to figure out here is how can we actually help the monitoring team with their dog fooding epic, because given this is like their top priority for the quarter. How can we add this into our work right now, so that it doesn't block us fully, but also provides them continuous feedback while we are working on this that we could update in our process. So I'm not really sure what kind of things we would want to depend on when it comes to our monitoring stack. especially with the sidekiq queue, this could be a great experiment to show the gaps of what we need and tell them this is the criteria for us to use it in reality. So I'm kind of open for ideas, like what would be worth to set as one of our goals as well while doing this epic.
It's my understanding that we're missing some features that allow us to properly parse or filter down what data we're trying to look at currently as it stands. I don't know how well we could dog food this capability as it stands today. Like we could filter down the environments, but we can't say, let's filter it down by, you know, deployments and specific pods and nodes and such.
Right, but that's exactly the type of feedback that I want us to provide. So,
okay, gotcha.
You know, that's...
Take a look at what they've got, because kind of is it?
I talked to, I put this in the agenda here, but I talked to Dove on Wednesday, and I think what Maren just said, like they want to know what to prioritize, because like they've been given the direction that they want that our monitor needs to be more like Grafana, but they can't just copy everything. So they want to know what specific things do we want. We talked a bit about variable templating, which I think would make it so that we could have a little bit closer functionality in some of the, you know, the Kubernetes monitoring dashboards. And we talked a little bit about GitLab default monitoring, but I think like reaching out to the PM, he's very eager to talk to us and to kind of get us to open up issues and then bring it to his attention so he knows what we need.
Now, with what you said, Jarv, just now, open up issues. I'm linking the epic that I promoted some time ago, where we already work with them. So just opening up issues we did already. And this is why I'm kind of pulling back to us. So if some of this that you're mentioning right now is still not there, we should be exposing that either in that epic or the other one. I think this one that I linked, dogfooding a single metric. So Karbek, if there are more items like this, please add those. And the point here is not blocking us. The point here is unblocking another team while we are already working on this, right? Like we are already building out all these dashboards right now. So might as well see what we can do to help out putting this in our product.
So like what I'd say is we need the stuff that's on that dashboard there, right? We need to have like the SLI figures, the aptX score, the error rate score, the RPS scores, those headline figures. Like that's what we're building on. And
right. But you're talking about, no, but you're talking about, Andrew, you're talking about the end result of a full completed product. What we're talking about here is that we have very basic things here and they don't even know where to start, right? Like that's the big problem. Like if you tell them just copy this, they don't know where to start. So we kind of need to work with them and guide them. They don't have the experience of using this properly, I would think. So the idea here is looking what we currently have, like Jarvis currently showing, and then exposing some of these things to them, right? Like we want to be able to filter things out. This is a really big priority. So adding that, so filtering per environment properly and so on and so on.
Right. I mean, I think the improvements that have been made since we originally opened this epic is that now we can express the dashboard panels in YAML. So we could, with JSON, start to create a whole bunch of different dashboards. We have Thanos connected so that, you know, we can pull up metrics that way. We don't have variable templating, which I think is probably going to be the next big thing that we need. And also, there's just like a lot of this default crap here that I don't know. It just makes it kind of annoying.
Makes no sense to exist there when it's empty, right? So
and
like,
like
why
of course,
are you putting that?
Yeah, like yeah. So, but I think in general, Maren, like yeah, we have this epic, but honestly, like I haven't looked at it since we created it, and I haven't followed it up. So we need to like probably refresh like see where we are now and where we want to be, because I can think of some more issues I could probably add. I should just add them.
All right. So just to make it clear, it's not up to us when we have our major epic to try someone else's smaller epic, or however big it is. It doesn't really matter. It's not up to us. They did come to us to ask us for advice. So now it's the time for us to provide help, right? So if this default crap is actually in the way, we should provide feedback to them on that, and then have them come to us with the things they adapted so that we can also adapt. But just saying that, oh, this is not great, is not really helpful to them when they are trying to make it better for us, you know? And that's the angle I'm trying to take here.
Right.
All right, cool.
Yeah, the thing that just looking at that, the one thing that would be quite an easy win for them would be to get annotations on those graphs of like when deploys happened and stuff.
Yeah, it's there. It's just that, remember like the little rocket ship, man? I think that's...
Oh, that was an annotation?
Oh, yeah, I think that was an annotation.
That's cute. That's cute.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I told Dove, like, you know, what needs to be, we need compelling reasons. I mean, it's up to them to come up with some really good compelling reasons why this is better than Grafana, and they don't have to beat Grafana on what Grafana does. They need to beat Grafana on integration with deployments and things like that, right?
Yeah, all the
we are not trying to.
Yeah.
Guys, please don't mix things up. They're not trying to beat Grafana. They're trying to get to a point where this is usable.
Yeah.
We are talking about a product that is rounded and completed versus part of the product that is just starting properly. So what we are trying to do here is to provide them how to get to the point where this is going to be a plausible replacement, not saying that we need all of that built right now.
Yeah.
So what I would say, like if I was to give some positive encouragement, is like take a look at that explore dashboard in Grafana. Like let us mess with that graph, right? So maybe it's just like PromQL, and we can just sort of type things in and change it on the fly. Because the problem is at the moment it's like really inaccessible. It's just like a graph. And if we want to dig further, we don't have the controls to do it. But at least if you had access to the PromQL, and you could kind of add filters in yourself, that might help. Does that make sense? For those of us
all of that,
PromQL.
all of that makes sense, Andrew. And this is the type of feedback that we can provide. That's the point I'm trying to explain, right? And if at some point we manage to replace one graph from all of the dashboards that we have, then that's already a success. Cool. All right, Skarbek, your item is next. Let's talk about that for a bit as well.
So the single source of truth for Chef and secrets. Graham has put together an excellent proof of concept using the Helmfile project to put this together. And he's got a working POC. He created a small GitLab secrets Helm chart that is able to grab all of our secrets out of GKMS appropriately and create the secret objects inside of our clusters. And similar, he's got the necessary templating done in his same POC repo where it grabs our configurations out of, if I recall correctly, he's just querying GitLab's API endpoint to grab the appropriate data out of the JSON files that we have stored inside of GitLab itself. So we're not using the Chef API at all. So far, I think the POC itself is fantastic. I think this is a good step forward to move forward, and I'm wondering if anyone has any concerns or questions about this, because otherwise I think we should go ahead and move forward with creating the necessary epic and issues to get started and enable us to provide all the secrets and configurations via CI to populate our Kubernetes clusters as necessary. This will remove the fact that we have configurations duplicated between Chef as well as Kubernetes, and the potential for configuration drift between these two environments.
My first question is the epic you shared with that product is using. It's not really clear to me where in there it says that they switched to Helm file.
It's not clear to me either. I haven't fully looked into that epic at all. I was given to that very late yesterday, so I didn't actually look into it. But this was the epic. Dan and I had a conversation about what we were trying to look for, because I heard through Graham they were trying to use Helm file. So as part of their cluster management, their cluster application management feature they're trying to work on will include Helm file to some capacity. But they've got a couple of other hurdles that they want to work through before they finally get to something like this, I imagine. The part that's going to kind of hold us up immediately off the bat is that currently they don't have a method to manage multiple clusters within one project with what they're trying to provide. So far, it's only limited to one repo is equal to one Kubernetes cluster for some reason. So I think it's still a work in progress from them, but I feel like if we went the Helm file route today, that gives us a leg up where we could easily integrate with something that they finally get rolled out that we could probably potentially utilize in the future.
And does it tie us too much into that project? Like how much will we be tied to Helm file going forward?
I
Like
don't
how
know the
easy
answer.
it is?
I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know what the end goal with the product team is trying to accomplish with this. If it's something where they plan on managing the UI and we end up providing with a bunch of configuration files that under the covers Helm files using, I think we'll be set up in a good position. But that's yet to be determined at this moment in time as far as I understood from our conversation.
All right, give me, so Daniel didn't share that with you, or he doesn't understand, know yet?
Maybe we didn't discuss it to the level of detail that I needed to answer your question, potentially.
Okay, I'll upload this and ask Daniel to take a look at the recording and provide us some feedback. The thing I would like to avoid is making a decision to go with one product going completely in another direction and us tying ourselves again into yet another workaround that we keep doing. So
I agree.
I think Graham can continue working on the POC. That's not the issue. What we could do is theoretically focus on one item that we could remove that would help us unblock us, right?
Yep.
We don't have to port all of the KCTL stuff. We can port one that we don't have currently. And that would not exclude us from making a decision one way or another, depending on how product goes.
I could agree with that. Should I go ahead and start spinning up necessary issues?
Jarv, how do you feel about this?
I mean, I think I put my thoughts in the issue, and I'm just worried that this could be a distraction from the problem we set out to solve, which is having a single source of truth for secrets. Now, maybe this is a way to get there, and it's the best way to get there, but I don't know. Like, I think we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of what we set out to solve, which is having a unified workflow for updating a chef secret and a Kubernetes secret. And that means actually fixing the way we do chef secrets, because chef secrets are updated through a engineer's workstation. They aren't updated through CI. So I think without solving that problem, we can't really have a single source of truth, because what is it going to be? Like, an engineer is going to update a secret for chef in his workstation and then go to a pipeline and run it? I mean, that doesn't seem like it's going to sustain us. Like, we need something better than that.
That's actually a bigger problem than this, Jarv.
Yeah, but I actually think we need to solve it. Like, you know, if we want a single source of truth, we need to updating secrets should be a one-step thing done through one workflow, not two workflows.
I'm very concerned with that, actually. Not because I don't agree with you. I agree with you there. We don't have the capacity to drive that as well. And I don't have the, I don't have the, well, you already know what I don't have to actually drive this further from a different angle. It's recorded, all of this. So
I
understand that you're trying to resolve the problem from like a proper angle, like resolve the underlying issue once and for all. But is it possible to just move on with this for a while and unblock cars until we get more, I'm choosing my words really carefully here, until we get more possibilities from others collaborating with us in other teams?
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen what the workflow will look like, and we can take a look at that after we finish, or after we decide on what we're going to do for the Kubernetes stuff. It's just like, I see two possibilities. One is with this proposal, I see two possibilities. You update a secret in Chef, and then you do a deploy, or you wait until the next deploy, and then you see the difference and you apply it. Or you have a pipeline running continuously that constantly is looking at the Chef secrets and updating our Kubernetes cluster and notifying us when there's a difference. Which I think, yeah, that was one of the early proposals. And I don't know, I think ideally we would just have a single pipeline that updates secrets in both locations and then triggers the Kubernetes pipeline afterwards. But I'm just really worried about getting out of sync and being surprised when
we already had an outage on staging the other day. Yesterday, actually. Yesterday? With registry overnight. It was directly related to this discussion.
No, it was related to a secret that was updated in one place but not the other place. Skarbek, is that true? I didn't hear about this.
I have no clue. I haven't fully caught up on what actually happened.
Great.
So
well,
we have an update. We have had an update in certificates. It's unclear, it's unclear yet. I didn't read everything. It's unclear where the update came from. But basically, we were just using a wrong certificate for registry, and that caused outage on staging, luckily. So this RCA that I'm supposed to be creating right now could expose exactly what you're saying, Jarv, and could actually support a bigger effort going forward. The problem I have with that is that puts another huge delay on the team of 2 that are currently doing this migration, right? And if I cannot source more help from the rest of the org or department, it's going to put a big dent in what we can do.
I think the use of Helm file, using the POC coming from Grain, will only solve half of this problem. It at least gets us to the point where Kubernetes is using the same configurations that our Chef configurations are using. How we make those changes is still up for debate. And that, I think that's a completely different conversation that we need to have.
Okay. Yeah, I'm more than happy to resolve a part of a problem first and then tackle the bigger problem later.
I think this is a good iterative step towards getting us to a good, solid solution in the future.
Yeah. All right. How about this? Let's do a couple of things in parallel. Sync up, Skarbek, sync up with Graham and explain the one thing that we are trying to resolve with Helm file, and have that as a focus of not the POC, but of how we could be doing this with the current infrastructure that we have. So resolve one problem, don't replace anything else. I'll, in the meantime, also sync with Daniel and ask him for feedback, like what they're actually doing there. And I'm going to raise up another thing with the rest of the department, that our secrets management needs to be more streamlined, and see whether there is any possibility for us to do that on relatively short term with the help from others. That's not going to resolve all the problems, Jarv, unfortunately, but it's going to get us moving and not blocked and not locked into a big running project that needs to be pushed through the whole of org.
Cool, sounds good.
All right. Anything else that we would like to discuss here? Cool. In that case, hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see each other next week.
Ciao.
Thank you.